The fluorescent office lights hummed as Gary Finch, my boss, laid out the termination papers. Then Sarah, my wife, walked in, her purse clutched tight, refusing to meet my eyes. The silence of her complicity hung heavy. Gary smirked. "I'm sure Sarah will help you sort out your financial future, David. She knows all the details now." I stood there, jobless, betrayed, and publicly humiliated. The early morning light, thin and gray, filtered through the kitchen window. I poured my coffee, the usual 2 sugars, a splash of milk. Sarah was already at the table, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, briefly, then back down. Her breakfast, a bowl of dry cereal, sat untouched. We didn't talk much in the mornings anymore, a quiet understanding that had settled over the house in the last few years. It wasn't contentious, just separate. Our comfortable ranch, bought 20 years ago, felt like a museum of shared habits, each item precisely where it had always been, holding silent witness to a life that had lost its urgency. I folded the newspaper to the business section, the headlines a familiar drone against the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Another Tuesday, another day at Sterling Accounting. The office at Sterling was already bustling when I arrived, the scent of stale coffee mixing with cleaner. I punched my code into the keypad, the familiar beep sounding strangely hollow. As I walked to my cubicle, a few heads turned, then quickly looked away. Mark from accounts receivable offered a tight-lipped nod, not his usual boisterous greeting. Brenda at the front desk meticulously rearranged a stack of brochures, avoiding my gaze entirely. A prickle of unease started to spread, a cold dampness beneath my collar. I sat at my desk, the glow of my monitor a familiar comfort, but the numbers on the spreadsheet blurred. The silence from my usual morning banters was deafening. Just before 10, the intercom on my phone buzzed, a sharp, intrusive sound. "David, my office," Gary Finch's voice, devoid of its usual affability, cut through the quiet. "Now." My stomach tightened. Gary never called me to his office like this. I walked down the carpeted hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. The closed doors of my colleagues' offices seemed to hold their breath as I passed. Gary's office, always meticulously tidy, felt colder than usual. He sat behind his large mahogany desk, his hands clasped, a stack of papers in front of him. He didn't offer me a seat, didn't even smile. "David," he began, his voice flat, "we've decided to make some changes here at Sterling. Effective immediately, your position has been eliminated." He gestured vaguely at the papers. "Restructuring, you understand. Performance alignment." The words hung in the air, detached and clinical. I felt a sudden rush of cold, a ringing in my ears. Eliminated. The words sounded absurd, like something from a bad movie. 22 years. My mind tried to grasp it, to find the mistake, the punchline. Then the door behind me opened. I turned. Sarah stood there, dressed in a smart navy suit I hadn't seen before, her purse clutched tight to her chest. Her eyes, usually so direct, skittered away from mine, fixing instead on Gary. A wave of nausea hit me, cold and sharp. The restructuring, the performance alignment, it all snapped into sickening focus. Gary, watching me, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, continued. "Sarah and I have grown quite close, David. We've even discussed some of your financial plans together. She's been very helpful in understanding the intricacies of your household budget." He pushed a single sheet of paper across the desk. It wasn't a severance package. It was a prenuptial agreement, drafted with a quick divorce in mind, outlining assets I didn't even know existed. The depth of it, the planning, the sheer, audacious betrayal, felt like a physical blow. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at Sarah, but she kept her gaze fixed on a spot just beyond Gary's shoulder, her face a mask. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. My jaw clenched so tight I felt a tremor run through my teeth. My hands, resting on the edge of Gary's desk, were steady, though a faint chill began to spread up my forearms. "I see," I managed, the words thin and reedy. It was all I could offer. The world had just tilted on its axis, but the floor beneath my feet felt solid enough for the moment. Gary pointed to a box near the door. "Brenda will help you pack your personal effects." The walk back to my cubicle felt like a gauntlet. Colleagues scurried to their phones, pretended to be engrossed in files. Mark, whose kids I'd watched grow up, wouldn't look at me. Brenda, her face flushed, handed me an empty cardboard box. My stapler, my coffee mug, a framed photo of Sarah and me from a vacation 5 years ago. They all went into the box. Each item felt heavy with the weight of a life dismantled. The drive home was a blur of familiar streets, the morning traffic a distant hum. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The old Ford, usually a comfort, felt alien. I pulled into the driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires, a sound that usually signified the end of a long day, the beginning of quiet. The house was silent, a vast, echoing space. The faint scent of Sarah's perfume still lingered in the air, a cruel mockery. I set the box of my office life down in the living room. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew it was John, my brother, my lawyer, but I couldn't answer it. Not yet. I needed to stand in the quiet, in the wreckage of my own making, and simply feel the cold, empty air. The handcuffs felt cold, biting into my wrists. The deputy, a young man with a neatly trimmed mustache, read me my rights in a monotone voice, the words blurring into a meaningless hum. I sat in the back of the squad car, staring out the window at the familiar streets of Elmwood, now seen through a mesh screen. A strange numbness had settled over me, a thick, protective layer. The rage, sharp and hot minutes earlier, had retreated, leaving behind a hollow ache. I didn't care about the arrest. I didn't care about the charges. All that mattered was the image of Sarah, standing in Gary Finch's office, her eyes fixed on him, avoiding mine. That was the real crime. County jail was colder, grayer than I'd imagined. The air smelled of disinfectant and something metallic. They processed me, took my mugshot, and led me to a holding cell. Inside, a hulking man with tattoos snaking up his neck leaned against the wall. He watched me as I came in, his eyes hard. "Look what the cat dragged in," he grunted, his voice thick. "Another white collar, expletive deleted. Think you're better than us?" His words, the casual contempt, sparked a flicker of the earlier rage. It wasn't about him. It was about everything. About Gary, about Sarah, about the shattered pieces of my life. I didn't answer. He took a step towards me, his chest puffed out. "What, the rich boy too good to talk?" He spat on the floor near my foot. That was it. I saw red. 22 years of quiet, of measured responses, of playing by the rules, evaporated in an instant. I lunged, a primal roar tearing from my throat. My fist connected with his jaw, a sickening crunch. He staggered, surprised, then came at me, but I was already a blur of motion. I hit him again, then again, not thinking, just hitting, feeling the bones beneath my knuckles. The anger had a physical weight now, a force I had never known I possessed. When the guards finally pulled me off, my hands were raw, and the man lay on the concrete floor, groaning, a dark pool spreading beneath his head. Later, a different deputy, older, wearier, showed me a video feed. The cell camera, it clearly showed the man initiating, spitting, lunging. "Self-defense," the deputy mumbled, making a note. "Good thing for you. Could have been worse." The man, I later heard, had been taken to the hospital. He'd lost a fair amount of blood. He needed surgery. Gary Finch's injuries, however, were more extensive. News filtered back to me through my brother John a few days later. One testicle removed, the other permanently damaged, 6 teeth lost, a ruptured spleen, a broken jaw. I listened to John's clipped professional tone and a grim satisfaction settled in my gut. He wouldn't be breeding expletive deleted to annoy women in the future. The thought was cold, stark, devoid of joy. It wasn't revenge, not really, it was just a fact. The physical harm I had inflicted, however severe, felt distant. The wounds on my body were superficial. The wounds inside, the ones Sarah had carved into me, were far deeper, far more painful. Sarah tried to call. My phone, returned to me after bail, showed her number several times. She even came to the jail once, John told me, but I refused to see her. I couldn't. The thought of her face, of her voice, sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I just wanted to bury the anguish, to pretend she no longer existed. John, my brother, arrived at the jail in his dark suit, looking like he'd stepped off a magazine cover. He handled everything efficiently, quietly. Bail was arranged, paperwork signed. He drove me back to his house, not mine. His wife, Mary, met us at the door, her face a mixture of concern and a certain weary resignation. "Come on in, David," she said softly. "We've got a guest room made up." For the next few days, I was a ghost in their house. I barely spoke, ate little, and spent most of my time staring out the window or at the ceiling. The betrayal, the termination, the humiliation all swirled inside me, a toxic brew. I knew I was being an ass, a total ass. John and Mary, with their quiet kindness, their easy routines, were trying to help, but I pushed them away. Every attempt at conversation, every sympathetic look, felt like an intrusion, a reminder of what I had lost. I was a man adrift, anchored only by my pain. One evening, Mary found me in the living room, staring at a blank TV screen. She sat down opposite me, her hands folded in her lap. "David," she began, her voice steady, "I know you're hurting. We both do. But John and I aren't the bad guys here. We're trying to help you. If you're going to be a total ass, you can go home to your cheating wife or get a hotel room. This isn't fair to us." Her words, sharp and direct, pierced through the fog. She was right. They were offering me a lifeline, and I was spitting on it. I looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time since I'd arrived. Her eyes, tired but firm, held no judgment, only a demand for respect. "I'm sorry, Mary," I said, the words rusty from disuse. "You're right, I'm sorry." It was genuine. Their home, their kindness, was the only safe harbor I had. From that moment, I tried. I started talking, helping with dishes, showing up for meals. Slowly, awkwardly, I began to treat them with the respect they deserved. John, meanwhile, wasted no time. Within days, he filed the divorce papers for Sarah and me. He also initiated a lawsuit against Sterling Accounting, citing wrongful termination and damages. His methodical approach was a small comfort, a steady hand in the chaos. Then, a few days later, the expected blow came. Gary Finch sued me for assault, seeking damages for his injuries. John, calm as ever, simply nodded. "Expected that," he said. He immediately filed a motion to have Gary's civil lawsuit put on hold, pending the outcome of my criminal assault case. "We need to get the criminal charges cleared first. Gives us time to build your defense. We'll go with temporary insanity. Given the circumstances, it's our best shot." He looked at me, his eyes serious. "You understand?" I nodded. I understood. With the criminal case behind us, the temporary insanity defense proving effective, John shifted his focus entirely to the civil lawsuit. We were suing Sterling Accounting for wrongful termination. Gary Finch sat across from us in court, his reconstructed jaw a testament to my earlier rage. But his eyes held a familiar, arrogant gleam. He still believed himself untouchable, his smirk a thin, confident line. He couldn't have known what John had been doing for months. While I was navigating the depths of my own betrayal, John had been quietly digging, turning over every stone. He'd found them, a string of former female employees, some from Sterling, some from Gary's previous firms. Women who had been through strikingly similar experiences. He'd interviewed them, built a pattern, a meticulously documented history of coercion and exploitation. These testimonies, hushed and painful, painted a picture of Gary Finch that went far beyond my isolated incident, revealing a man who systematically used his power to blackmail and exploit. The civil trial against Sterling Accounting began. The jury listened, their faces a mixture of shock and quiet outrage, as John laid out the case. He presented not just my termination, but the broader pattern of Gary's predatory behavior, framing my outburst as a desperate reaction to an unbearable chain of events fueled by the toxic environment Gary had created. The jury, a cross-section of Elmwood citizens, seemed to grasp the depth of the betrayal, the humiliation. They empathized, they wanted to fix it. After deliberations, they returned. The foreman stood, reading their decision. They found in my favor. They had attempted to award me a significant sum, not just for the wrongful termination, but for the emotional suffering, for Gary's egregious behavior that had created the conditions for my public unraveling. But the judge, a man with shrewd eyes and a kind but firm demeanor, stopped them. He thanked them for their service, then explained gently that while he understood their impulse, the specific parameters of this lawsuit against the firm did not allow for such comprehensive damages. He implied, subtly, that a separate action might be more appropriate for those particular harms. John caught the hint instantly. He exchanged a knowing glance with me. Later that day, he filed a separate civil lawsuit, this time directly against Gary Finch. It was a clear, direct shot, seeking damages for emotional distress, the financial ruin, and the sheer personal toll of his actions. This wasn't about the firm anymore. This was about Gary. The second trial was quicker. The evidence was even more damning, focused squarely on Gary's conduct. The same pattern of exploitation, the same testimonies from the Bree women John had found, now presented directly against Gary himself. The jury, unfettered by the previous legal constraints, heard the full, ugly truth. They nailed him, as John demoted it. They awarded me a substantial six-figure sum, a validation not just of my financial loss, but of the deep, unseen scars Gary had inflicted. It was a cold comfort, a hollow victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. In the immediate aftermath, the news spread like wildfire through Sterling accounting and the broader professional community. Gary Finch, facing the weight of the civil judgment and the public scandal, was fired immediately. The firm, scrambling to protect its reputation, cut him loose with no severance, no pension. It was a swift, brutal end to his career. But the worst was yet to come for him. Based on the extensive testimonies John had gathered during his investigation, the district attorney's office decided to act. Within weeks, Gary Finch was arrested and charged with rape. The news when it broke was a shockwave. The criminal case against Gary was a different beast. It was challenging, John explained, because there was a distinct lack of physical evidence for many of the alleged assaults, years having passed. The prosecution would have to rely heavily on witness accounts, on the power of their collective voices, and they came forward. 6 women, including Sarah. The news hit me with a jolt. She was testifying against him. It wasn't something I had considered. My own divorce proceedings, a slow, methodical grind, consumed my attention. I didn't closely follow Gary's criminal trial. The details, the lurid accusations, felt too close, too raw. I wanted no part of it, wanted to just focus on rebuilding my own life. But then weeks later, I read the headline in the Elmwood Daily. Gary Finch had been found guilty of something. The article was vague on the specific charges. It wasn't the primary rape charge, but a related lesser count, still significant enough to warrant a serious sentence. He was sentenced to 7 years in state prison, a quiet, grim justice. I also read, almost as an aside in the article, that Sarah Miller had attended nearly every day of Gary's trial, a silent, unmoving presence in the gallery. And she had been called as a witness, her testimony, like the others, describing the pattern of blackmail, the forced encounters, the quiet coercion. The detail, small and seemingly insignificant to the general public, resonated deeply within me. It didn't change anything, but it added another layer, another dimension to the complicated tapestry of our shared broken history. The news of Sarah's testimony, of her own place in Gary Finch's web, settled over me like a cold, thin blanket. Intellectually, I understood. She had been a victim too, caught in the same predatory snare. But the image burned into my mind of her standing in Gary's office that day, her eyes on him, her silence a profound betrayal. It wouldn't fade. It overshadowed everything else. The intellectual understanding of her plight couldn't pierce the raw, visceral pain of that moment, of all the moments that followed. So I pushed forward with the divorce. There was no other path. My love for her, once a steady flame, felt smothered by the ash of betrayal. I tried, in my quieter moments, to see it from her point of view, to imagine the fear, the coercion, the desperate choices. But the pain, a constant, dull throb beneath my ribs, clouded any capacity for empathy. My mind kept returning to the same thought. If only she had trusted me. If only she had told me. We could have dealt with Gary together. We could have faced it. But the fact that she went back for more, as I kept thinking, the continued relationship, the meetings, the silent complicity, it gnawed at me. It made me question if, deep down, some part of her had harbored a willingness, a quiet acquiescence. That doubt, that insidious seed, made the pain unbearable. mixing my heartbreak with a bitter, simmering resentment. The final divorce hearing was held in a small, impersonal courtroom, the air thick with unspoken history. Sarah was there, sitting beside her attorney, her face pale, her hair pulled back tightly. Every few minutes she'd turn, trying to catch my eye, to somehow connect across the sterile space. I kept my gaze fixed on the judge, on my attorney, on anything but her. My jaw was tight. I felt like a block of ice, hardened and unmoving. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I wouldn't crack. When I finally did glance her way, my eyes brushing hers for a fleeting second, her expression was a raw plea. Her mouth was a tight line, but her eyes, wide and glistening, begged for something. For understanding, for forgiveness, for a glimpse of the man she once knew. But I was in too much pain to bother. Too much pain to offer anything but a hardened, empty stare. I looked away. The judge, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, read the decree. The words were simple, clear, and utterly final. The marriage of David Miller and Sarah Miller is hereby dissolved. The gavel hit the wood with a sharp crack, echoing in the quiet room. It was done. Brutally, irrevocably done. A choked sob escaped Sarah. Then another. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. Her attorney tried to comfort her, but it was no use. She began to wail, a raw animal sound that cut through the courtroom's decorum. It was a complete breakdown. The judge called for a recess. A bailiff brought her water, but she only grew more hysterical, her body racked with uncontrollable sobs. Eventually, they called for an ambulance. I watched, impassive, as two paramedics led her out of the courtroom, her body still shaking, her cries fading down the hallway. I left the court that day believing I would never see her again. The chapter was closed. A door slammed shut on 22 years. With all the lawsuits settled, the financial landscape of my life was radically altered. The wrongful termination settlement, the damages from Gary, the residual assets from the divorce, it totaled nearly $3 million. After paying John his 30%, I was left with a sum I'd never dreamed of possessing. John, true to his character, initially refused his fee. "David, you're my brother. This isn't about the money," he said, pushing the check back across his desk, but I wouldn't hear of it. "You earned it, John," I insisted. "Every cent. You saved my life, my financial future. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself." His work had been tireless, his support unwavering. He eventually accepted, a small, tired nod. I was now financially free, no longer beholden to a Jew or a boss, but the freedom felt hollow. I was divorced, my life uprooted, and utterly directionless. Returning to Sterling accounting was unthinkable. The accounting world, the quiet hum of numbers, now felt tainted, a reminder of everything I had lost. I had money but no wife, no career, no clear path forward. Just a vast, empty space where my life used to be. My life felt like a small boat, cut loose from its moorings, drifting aimlessly in the vast gray expanse of Lake Michigan. The divorce was final, the money substantial, but the pain remained, a dull, aching presence in my chest. I spent my days at John and Mary's, helping with yard work, running errands, anything to avoid the silence of my own empty house. The quiet kindness of their home was a comfort, but also a constant reminder of the life I no longer had. It was Mary who, with her characteristic quiet practicality, finally intervened. We were sitting on their porch swing one evening, the air thick with the scent of blooming lilacs. "David," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you can't just float forever. You always talked about wanting to travel, remember? Europe, you said. See the old world." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a gentle challenge. "Now you've got the money and no other ties. There's nothing holding you here. It's the perfect time." Her words stirred something deep within me, a memory of a younger self full of unfulfilled dreams. I did remember. Sarah and I had talked about it, sketching out itineraries over late-night coffee, imagining ourselves walking through ancient ruins, sipping wine in sun-drenched squares. Always with Sarah. The thought of going it alone now felt hollow, an echo of a beautiful dream turned bittersweet. But her logic was sound. What else was there? This Midwestern life, once so comforting, had shattered me. I needed a physical escape, a vast distance between myself and the wreckage. So I bought a ticket. Italy first. It seemed as good a place as any to start. The plane ride was long, the drone of the engines a steady companion to my thoughts. Landing in Rome, the sheer ancient beauty, the vibrant chaos of the city was a jolt to the system. It was a world away from Elmwood, a stark contrast to the inner turmoil that still churned within me. The Colosseum, massive and scarred, stood as a testament to ancient struggles, strangely mirroring my own recent battles. I walked its dusty grounds, the ghosts of gladiators and emperors providing a strange silent company. I sought out quiet cafes, sitting alone with an espresso, observing the endless flow of life around me. Families laughing, lovers holding hands, businessmen rushing by. I felt profoundly disconnected from it all, a ghost moving through a bustling, vibrant world. The sounds and smells were foreign, the language a melodic mystery. It was a form of anonymity, a brief reprieve from the weight of my own identity. Florence offered fleeting distractions. The art, the architecture, the sheer beauty of the city commanded a part of my attention. Michelangelo's David, majestic and perfect, held me captivated for a long time, its serene strength a stark contrast to my own frayed nerves. But even amidst the grandeur, the underlying ache remained, a constant companion, a dull throb beneath my ribs. I moved through Italy, a solitary figure. Venice, with its labyrinthine canals and hushed waterways, felt like a mirror to my own journey. Each gondola, carrying couples, families, felt like a small, poignant reminder of shared dreams now lost, of a future I had once envisioned, now gone. The shimmering reflections on the water only served to highlight my own solitary path. Despite the change of scenery, the relentless march of ancient history, Sarah's memory, and the sharp sting of her betrayal were constant companions. They were like a phantom limb ache, ever present, a dull throb just beneath the surface, regardless of the physical distance I put between us. I tried to engage with locals, practicing simple Italian phrases from my guidebook. Un caffè, per favore. Grazie. They would smile, offer a word or two, but genuine connection felt impossible, a thick barrier of pain separating me from the easy warmth of human interaction. I kept a journal, a worn leather-bound book I'd bought in Rome. Each evening in some anonymous hotel room, I would dutifully record the day's sights, the unfamiliar flavors, the fleeting impressions. The act of writing was a continued anchor, a small ritual that helped me process the shifting landscapes, both external and internal. The novelty of travel, the initial excitement of being somewhere new, began to wear thin. It was slowly replaced by a growing, undeniable realization that distance alone, no matter how far, could not heal the deep, unaddressed wounds of my heart. It was a costly choice, this journey. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The months blurred into a year, Europe unfolding before me like a fated, beautiful, and often lonely tapestry. I moved from Italy to France, then to Germany, weaving through ancient cities and quiet countrysides, always searching for something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't happiness, not yet. Perhaps it was just a new way to exist, a less painful one. Gradually, cautiously, I started to allow myself brief, guarded friendships with fellow travelers. A young couple backpacking through the Alps, an older woman on a pilgrimage in Spain. We shared stories, tales of distant homes and future plans, always skirting around the edges of our deepest pains, like boats carefully navigating a shallow reef. In a small internet cafe in Paris, the smell of fresh baguettes drifting in from the street, I found an unexpected email from John. The subject line was simply news from home. The body was brief, almost cryptic. He hinted at developments, at things changing, but offered no details, just an invitation to call. It brought a strange mix of apprehension and a reluctant pull towards the life I had so deliberately abandoned. A reminder that the past, no matter how far I traveled, wasn't truly left behind. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the phone icon. The thought of hearing his voice, of unraveling the threads of what had happened, felt too heavy. I wasn't ready to fully re-engage with the source of my trauma. I closed the laptop. A few weeks later, in Berlin, I met Lena. She was a kind German artist, her eyes sharp and observant, her laugh quick and genuine. We fell into easy conversation over coffee at a small gallery she frequented. She talked about art, about philosophy, about the subtle nuances of light in the city. Our connection was based on shared intellectual interests, a gentle respite from my internal turmoil, devoid of any romantic expectation. She seemed to sense my guarded nature, the invisible wall I had built around myself. She never pushed, never asked about my past. Instead, she offered comfort through shared meals in quiet restaurants, through long, contemplative walks through the Tiergarten, and through the simple companionship of comfortable silence. My journal entries from this period showed a subtle shift. The raw anger that had once dominated the pages began to recede, replaced by a more introspective sadness, a quiet resignation. I still wrote about the betrayal, about Sarah, but the words were less charged, more observed. I found myself increasingly observing families in parks, couples holding hands on benches, children chasing pigeons in squares. A profound sense of loss would wash over me, a quiet ache for the life I thought I would have, the simple, mundane joys that now felt forever out of reach. Then a letter arrived, a real letter forwarded from John's office, postmarked Elmwood. It was from Mary. Her familiar, rounded handwriting filled the pages. She wrote about the small town, about John, about her garden, and then she wrote about Sarah. Sarah, she said, was struggling. The divorce, the public humiliation, Gary's imprisonment, it had all left her isolated. People talked. Neighbors looked away. She was working a low-wage job on her reputation in tatters, facing judgment from a community that rarely forgave. The news stirred a complex mix of emotions in me. A flicker of pity, yes, but also a surge of residual anger. It was a stark reminder of the far-reaching consequences of our choices, of the ripple effect of betrayal. She was paying a price, a different one than mine perhaps, but a heavy one nonetheless. It didn't make my pain disappear, but it added another layer of understanding, a grim recognition that we were both, in our own ways, adrift. Mary's letter also included a small, encouraging note about something else. You should try sketching, David. Get yourself some pencils. You always had a good eye. It helps sometimes to just observe. Before I left, she had pressed a small, cheap sketchbook into my hands. Now I found myself pulling it out, sketching the faces I saw in cafes, the architectural lines of old buildings, the quiet beauty of a park bench. It was a meditative quality, this act of capturing the world around me, a new outlet for the quiet hum of my mind. I considered extending my travels indefinitely. The thought of returning home, of confronting a past I was still ill-equipped to face, felt daunting. This nomadic existence offered a certain kind of freedom and escape from accountability. Yet, paradoxically, a growing sense of rootlessness began to overshadow the initial allure of freedom. This constant movement, this endless search was starting to feel exhausting. A quiet longing for something familiar, something resembling home, began to stir within me, a subtle pull I couldn't ignore. The rootlessness I felt pulled me eastward, towards the rawer landscapes and histories of Eastern Europe. I found myself in Budapest, then Prague, seeking less touristy paths, hoping for a deeper anonymity amidst the echoes of grand, tumultuous pasts. The grand boulevards and ancient bridges felt more somber, more fitting to my mood. I started spending more time alone, walking for hours, my interactions with others becoming infrequent. The cafes were quiet, the parks vast, allowing me to retreat further into the labyrinth of my own thoughts. One afternoon, in a quiet corner of a Budapest park, I stumbled upon an older American expatriate, a man named George. He was sketching, just like I had started to do, capturing the intricate lines of a distant synagogue. He had the kind of face that held a lifetime of stories. We fell into conversation, hesitant at first, then flowing freely as the afternoon light softened. George had lived a long, complicated life, filled with its own share of mistakes, betrayals, and slow, hard-won redemption. He spoke of regret, of the necessity of forgiveness, not just for others, but for the self. His quiet wisdom, born of experience, began to chip away at my hardened shell, offering a new perspective on the intricate dance between pain and healing. He didn't preach, he just told his truth, and in it, I found a reflection of my own. That conversation, coupled with Mary's letter, finally pushed me to make the call. I found a payphone, the old-fashioned kind, near my hostel. The connection was clear, almost too clear. "John," I said, my voice sounding foreign even to myself. "It's David." His voice was warm, relieved. "David, good to hear from you. We were getting worried. Where are you?" I told him. Then carefully I asked about the news Mary had hinted at. He told me more about Sarah. She was struggling, badly, financially, socially. Our old friends had largely abandoned her. The town, small and unforgiving, had turned its back. She was living a lonely existence haunted by her choices, by the consequences. Then he dropped the bombshell. "There's something else, David. Gary Finch. He's up for parole." The words hit me like a physical blow. A cold shiver ran down my spine, chilling me to the bone. Parole. The man who had shattered my life, destroyed my marriage, was potentially going to be free. Old fears, old rages flared within me, a sudden unwanted heat. The world, which had felt so vast and distant, suddenly felt small, claustrophobic. The idea of Gary, free and potentially seeking retribution, planted a seed of urgency in my mind. Would the justice I felt had been served be undone? Would the years of healing I had undergone be for naught? I wrestled with the implications of Gary's potential release. Would he come back to Elmwood? Would he try to find me? The thought was unsettling, an unwelcome intruder in the carefully constructed peace I had tried to build. John then added another detail. "Sarah's been trying to reach out," he said, "to me, to Mary, asking about you. She's expressed a lot of remorse, David, a lot of regret." This news brought a fresh wave of confusion. Anger, yes, still there, but tinged now with a flicker of pity for her isolated life. And beneath it all, a ghost of the deep love I had once felt, a fragile, painful memory. I found myself back in my room, pulling out my old journal. I reread entries from the early days, the raw anger, the explosive rage, the utter devastation. Then I read the more recent ones, the weary introspection, the quiet observations, the subtle shifts in perspective. The contrast was stark. I had changed. My initial burning conviction that I could simply outrun my past, that distance was the cure, began to fade. I felt a growing conviction that I couldn't hide forever. My journey abroad, while necessary for survival, was not a permanent solution. It had been a period of exile, a time to heal, but true healing, true peace meant facing the remnants of my past head on. The thought of confronting Gary, or even seeing Sarah again, now felt less like a threat and more like an inevitable, painful step towards my own peace. It was time. I went to the nearest travel agent, a small, dusty office tucked away on a side street. "A flight to Chicago," I said, my voice firm. "As soon as possible." The decision was heavy but resolute. I needed to go home. I needed to face it all. The familiar flat landscape of the Midwest stretched out beneath the airplane window, endless and green, a stark contrast to the dramatic peaks and ancient cities of Europe. The humid air, thick and heavy, wrapped around me the moment I stepped off the plane, a physical reminder of everything I had left behind. I was back. John and Mary met me at the gate, their smiles warm, their hugs genuine. But beneath the welcome, I sensed a quiet tension, an unspoken expectation. My return wasn't just a visit, it was a reckoning. I settled back into their guest room, the house feeling both familiar in its layout and foreign in its quiet stability, a stability I no longer possessed. My first few weeks back in Elmwood were spent in a careful dance of avoidance. I navigated the town with a cautious awareness, steering clear of the grocery store on certain days, choosing different routes for my walks, anything to avoid a chance encounter with Sarah. The small town felt smaller, tighter than I remembered, every corner holding a potential ghost. Then John confirmed it. Gary Finch had indeed been granted parole. His release date was set for the coming months. The news, though expected, solidified my resolve. Another collision was inevitable. The future, once a blank canvas, now felt like a converging path. I also learned more about Sarah's life since I'd left. She had lost her job as a dental hygienist. The scandal and public judgment too much for the practice to bear. She was working odd jobs now, waitressing at the diner on the highway, cleaning houses, barely making ends meet. A visible shadow of her former self, John said. One afternoon, I wasn't careful enough. I was at the local grocery store picking up a few things for Mary. As I rounded the corner of the cereal aisle, pushing my cart, she was there. Sarah, she stood by the frozen vegetables, her back to me, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She looked thinner, her shoulders more slumped. When she turned, her eyes, once so bright and full of life, were dulled, haunted. Our eyes met across the aisle. For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The canned goods on the shelves, the fluorescent lights humming above, everything blurred around us. Her face crumpled, a raw, naked pain washing over it. My heart, which I thought had hardened into stone, gave a strange, painful lurch. I simply nodded, a stoic acknowledgement of our shared history, of the unspoken weight between us. Then I turned my cart and walked away, not looking back. That brief, silent encounter confirmed the depth of Sarah's suffering. It stirred a complicated mix of emotions within me. Residual anger, yes, but also a profound, weary sadness, and an undeniable flicker of pity. The woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me, was broken. My initial judgment, based on what I had seen and heard, felt incomplete. I needed to understand the full truth from her perspective, not just the fragments I had pieced together from a distance. I called John later that evening. "I need to talk to her," I said, the words heavy. He understood. He arranged a meeting, a neutral ground selected, a small diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where locals went for pie and coffee and usually kept to themselves. The meeting was strained. We sat across from each other in a worn vinyl booth, the clatter of plates and distant chatter of other patrons, a muted backdrop. Sarah arrived first, her hands clasped tight on the table, her eyes red-rimmed. When I sat down, she started to talk, her voice a low, shaky whisper. She recounted the full extent of Gary's blackmail, the slow, insidious tightening of his grip, the terror she had felt, the humiliation of his demands, the desperate fear of losing me if she confessed. She hadn't gone back for more, not willingly. It was coercion, pure and simple, a living nightmare she couldn't escape. She admitted her colossal mistake in not trusting me, in not coming to me sooner. "I was a coward, David," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "A terrible coward. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could make it go away. I didn't want you to hate me. I didn't want to lose you." She acknowledged the terrible burden she had carried alone, the secret that had festered between us. I listened, my heart aching with a pain that was both old and new. The truth in its raw, unvarnished form was devastating. I finally saw the fear that had driven her actions, the impossible choices she believed she faced. My initial judgment, so absolute and unyielding, had been incomplete. It had lacked this crucial, agonizing piece of the puzzle. The raw, tearful conversation with Sarah left me with a profound, exhausting sense of clarity. The missing piece of the puzzle, her terror, her desperate fear of losing me, finally made sense. But understanding, I realized, was not the same as peace. The betrayal, sharp and cutting at first, had evolved into a deep, jagged scar. It wouldn't simply vanish. It was a part of me now, a testament to the life that had been and the one that wouldn't be. I started seeing a new therapist, a quiet woman with kind eyes in a small office downtown. We worked through the layers, carefully peeling back the trauma, the simmering anger, the lingering echoes of love and loss. It wasn't a quick fix, but a slow, methodical process like charting a complicated ledger. Professionally, I knew I couldn't go back to Sterling. The thought of it, of the old life, felt like trying to wear a coat that no longer fit. I decided to start my own accounting firm. A small office, just 2 rooms above the hardware store on Main Street. It was a fresh professional start, a way to channel my focus into building something new, something entirely my own. The community, initially wary, still remembering the headlines and the scandal, slowly began to welcome me back. A few old clients from Sterling, sensing my quiet determination, trickled in. They respected resilience here, and a man willing to put in the work to rebuild. News of Gary Finch continued to filter through John. Recently paroled, he had struggled to reintegrate. The small town had a long memory. Public scorn followed him like a shadow. He couldn't find gainful employment. His punishment, it seemed, continued far beyond the prison walls. He moved out of Elmwood, seeking anonymity somewhere else. I realized then that true justice wasn't just about court rulings, about sentences handed down by a judge. It was about the long, painful consequences that rippled through lives, touching everyone connected, far beyond the initial act. I encountered Sarah again, a few months after opening my firm. It was at a community event, a fundraiser for the local library. She was serving punch, her face still thinner, but with a new, weary resolve in her eyes. Our eyes met across the crowded room, no longer the frantic, pleading glance from the grocery store. This time there was a tentative, respectful exchange of pleasantries. "David," she said softly, a slight nod. "Sarah," a recognition of our shared, painful past, without pretense, without expectation. We talked for a few minutes about the weather, about the library. There was no grand reconciliation, no sudden rekindling of romance. Just a quiet acknowledgement of two people irrevocably changed, finding their own separate paths forward. I continued my journaling, not as a therapy requirement anymore, but as a habit. It had become a way to reflect on the complexities of life, the quiet resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring nature of love and loss. The pages, once filled with rage, now held observations, questions, and a slow-growing understanding. I found solace in the simple Midwestern rhythms, long walks along the river, conversations with John and Mary over coffee in their kitchen, the changing seasons painting the fields outside my window, the stark beauty of winter, the rebirth of spring, the heat of summer. Each brought its own quiet comfort, a reminder of cycles, of growth. I realized that paying the price wasn't just about financial settlements or prison sentences. It was the profound, ongoing internal work of repairing a shattered life. It was about taking responsibility, about confronting truth, about slowly, painstakingly putting oneself back together, piece by damaged piece. I chose to focus on building a future rooted in integrity and quiet strength. I accepted that some wounds heal, but they always leave indelible marks. My life wouldn't be the one I had planned, but it would be mine. The story didn't conclude with a tidy happily ever after, the kind you read in books. Instead, I was living a life of quiet purpose, having faced my demons and learned to carry my burdens with a hard-won sense of peace. I understood that morality wasn't a simple equation of right and wrong, but a winding path of choices, consequences, and the continuous effort to live genuinely, with integrity, even after the world had tried to break you. The seasons continued their slow rotation over Elmwood. My small accounting firm on Main Street hummed with a quiet, steady rhythm. The numbers I balanced for local businesses offered a tangible, ordered world, a stark contrast to the chaos my own life had once been. John and Mary remained my anchors, their kitchen table a place of unwavering support and easy conversation. I still walked by the river, still felt the chill of autumn air or the promise of spring deep in my bones. The journal, now thick with entries, lay on my nightstand, a record of growth, of pain, and of the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding. The scars of betrayal remained, a part of my story, but they no longer dictated my present. I had learned that life rarely offers neat resolutions or clean slates. Instead, it offers a winding path, lessons etched in hardship, and the chance to carry one's burdens with grace. I had faced the wreckage, understood the depths of fear and consequence, and found a hard-won peace in the simple act of moving forward, one honest day at a time.